Hello, and welcome back to Drift into Dreams. If you enjoy relaxing sleep stories, please subscribe and join our peaceful community. Now, get comfortable, and let's begin tonight's journey.
The Forgotten Moon Village, the road beneath the silver moon. Welcome, dear friend. Before tonight's story begins, make yourself as comfortable as you can. Allow your shoulders to soften. Let your hands rest gently. Take one slow, easy breath in and a long, peaceful breath out. There is nowhere else you need to be. Nothing left to finish. Nothing left to worry about. For the next little while, the world can wait. Tonight, we are going somewhere very few people have ever seen. Not because it is hidden by walls, not because it is guarded by gates, but because it can only be found by those who are willing to slow down, far beyond the noisy cities, beyond the highways where cars hurry through the darkness, beyond the towns marked on every map. There is an old stone road. Most travelers never notice it. Some walk right past it. Others believe it is only a trick of the moonlight. But on rare nights, when the moon shines bright and silver, and when someone's heart longs for peace instead of speed, that quiet road appears. It is said that the road leads to a place forgotten by time itself, a place where nobody rushes, where every smile is genuine, where every evening feels warm and safe, a place called the Forgotten Moon Village. Tonight, you find yourself standing at the beginning of that ancient road. The moon hangs low in the sky, brighter than you have ever seen it before. Its gentle light paints the stones beneath your feet with soft silver. The night air is cool, not cold, just cool enough to feel refreshing. A gentle breeze carries the scent of pine trees, lavender flowers, and the distant sea. You begin to walk. Slowly. There is no reason to hurry. With every quiet step, the sounds of the ordinary world begin to disappear. The traffic fades away. The busy voices become silent. Even your thoughts seem softer now. Soon, only three sounds remain: the whisper of the wind through the trees, the gentle song of a nearby stream, and your calm footsteps along the old stone path. The road curves between enormous oak trees that have stood here for hundreds of years. Their branches stretch across the path like welcoming arms. Tiny white flowers bloom beneath them. Fireflies drift lazily through the air. Each one glows with a warm golden light. They never rush. They simply float, as though dancing to music only they can hear. Far ahead, a lantern glows. Its light is steady and warm. As you come closer, you see an elderly man standing quietly beside the road. He wears a long gray coat. His white beard moves gently in the evening breeze. In his hand is an old lantern, unlike any you have seen before. There is no flame inside it. Instead, it seems to hold a small piece of moonlight itself. The old man smiles kindly. "Good evening," he says in a voice as gentle as falling leaves. "I've been expecting you." His words feel strangely comforting, as though you have met him before, long ago. In a dream you almost remember. "My name," he says with another quiet smile, "is Elias. I have cared for the lanterns of the village for longer than anyone can remember." He lifts the lantern slightly. Its silver light stretches farther down the road. In the distance, you see tiny lights scattered across the hills, small cottages, stone chimneys, gardens glowing beneath the moon. "It is almost bedtime in the village," Elias whispers, "but everyone will be happy to know another traveler has found the road." You continue walking together. Neither of you feels the need to speak very much. The silence is peaceful, comfortable, like sitting beside an old friend without needing any words. After a few more minutes, a wooden sign appears beside the path. Its letters are beautifully carved. Time has faded the paint, yet the words remain perfectly clear. They read, "Welcome to the Forgotten Moon Village." Below the words, someone has carved a smaller message: "Leave your worries here." You pause for a moment. Without really thinking, you imagine placing every worry, every busy thought, every heavy feeling beside that little wooden sign, and somehow your heart feels lighter. Elias smiles gently. Everyone leaves something behind when they arrive, and everyone takes something peaceful home when they leave. The village gates stand just ahead now. Warm golden lights shine from every window. Somewhere inside, a bell rings softly, not loudly, not to hurry anyone, only to welcome another peaceful evening. You step through the gate, and as you do, it feels as though the entire village quietly whispers, "Welcome home," the village where no one ever hurried. As the wooden gate closed softly behind you, the quiet village welcomed you without a single loud sound. No bells rang with excitement. No crowds gathered to stare. Instead, a peaceful stillness wrapped around you like a warm blanket on a cool evening. The stone path beneath your feet was smooth, as though thousands of gentle footsteps had polished it over many years. Tiny lanterns hung outside every cottage. Their light was soft, golden, almost like little stars that had decided to rest closer to the earth. The air carried the comforting scent of fresh bread, lavender flowers, and warm cedar wood. It was the kind of fragrance that made every breath feel slower than the one before. Elias walked quietly beside you, his moon lantern casting a gentle silver glow across the path. "You may notice something unusual," he said. "You listened. There are no clocks that rush people here." You looked toward the village square. In the center stood an old clock tower built from pale stone. Its hands moved, but so slowly that they were almost impossible to see. "The clock keeps perfect time," Elias smiled. "It simply reminds us that life is meant to be lived, not chased." You continued walking. Outside one small cottage, an elderly woman carefully arranged white flowers into a wooden basket. She looked up and smiled. "Good evening," she whispered. Her voice was so gentle that it blended naturally with the evening breeze. She did not ask where you had come from. She did not ask how long you would stay. In the forgotten moon village, everyone believed that every traveler arrived exactly when they were meant to. Farther along the road, a little ginger cat stretched lazily beneath a wooden bench. It opened one sleepy eye, looked at you for a moment, then curled back into a comfortable ball, perfectly content beneath the moonlight. Nothing here seemed afraid. Nothing seemed rushed. Even the leaves drifting from the trees floated slowly through the cool night air before softly touching the ground. Ahead, the village square opened before you. It was small but beautiful. A stone fountain stood at its center. Instead of spraying high into the air, the water flowed gently from one smooth bowl into another. Its quiet trickling sounded like a peaceful melody. Around the fountain stood wooden benches, each carefully carved with tiny stars and crescent moons. Several villagers sat together. Some knitted warm blankets. Others quietly read old books. One elderly gentleman slowly polished a violin. Though he never seemed in any hurry to play it, there was no loud conversation. Only soft smiles, kind greetings, and long, comfortable moments of silence. Elias stopped beside the fountain. "This village has only one treasure," he said. You looked around, wondering what precious object he meant. He smiled warmly. "Our treasure is peace. The moment someone begins to hurry, the village gently reminds them to slow down." You noticed something curious. Not a single person carried more than they needed. No heavy bags, no overflowing baskets, no signs of rushing from one place to another. Everyone seemed completely satisfied with exactly where they were. A cool breeze drifted through the square. Somewhere nearby, wind chimes made from polished shells sang softly together. The sound rose gently into the night before fading into silence once more. The moon climbed a little higher. Its silver light covered every rooftop, every garden, every quiet window glowing with warmth. For the first time in what felt like forever, you realized you weren't thinking about tomorrow or yesterday. Only this peaceful moment. Only this quiet village. Only the gentle rhythm of your own breathing. Elias noticed the calm expression on your face. "It happens to everyone," he whispered. "The village has a way of helping people remember something they forgot." "What is that?" you asked softly. He smiled. "How peaceful life can feel when nothing is asking you to be faster." Together, You continued walking deeper into the moonlit streets. Somewhere ahead, the warm aroma of freshly baked bread drifted through the air. Elias smiled knowingly. I believe someone has just finished tonight's last loaf. And tomorrow, you'll meet the village baker. The two of you disappeared quietly beneath the silver moon, while the forgotten moon village settled gently into another peaceful night. One slow breath, one quiet smile, and one beautiful dream at a time. The baker who baked under the moon. The following evening arrived as gently as the one before. The sun quietly slipped beyond the distant hills, leaving behind soft shades of lavender, pale blue, and silver. On Bitwan, the village lanterns awakened, not suddenly, but slowly, as though each little light stretched after a peaceful day's rest. You stepped outside your cozy cottage. The evening air felt fresh. The scent of blooming jasmine drifted gently through the narrow stone streets. Far above, the moon was already waiting, large, bright, and calm. Just outside your door, Elias stood holding his familiar moon lantern. "Good evening," he said with his gentle smile. "I believe someone is waiting to meet you." Together, you walked through the quiet streets once again. Tonight felt even calmer than yesterday. Some villagers sat outside their cottages, quietly sipping warm tea. Others watched the stars without speaking. No one seemed to feel the need to hurry. As you turned a small corner, a warm and comforting aroma filled the air. Fresh bread, sweet cinnamon, golden Buddha, and just a hint of honey. The delicious scent floated through the village like a gentle invitation. Elias smiled. "We've arrived." Before you stood a tiny stone bakery. Its windows glowed with soft amber light. A wooden sign gently swayed above the door. It read, "Moon Oven Bakery." You stepped inside. Warmth surrounded you immediately. The room was peaceful. Wooden shelves held fresh loaves of bread, round rolls, golden pastries, small honey cakes. Everything looked simple, yet made with extraordinary care. Behind a large wooden table stood an elderly baker. His white apron was lightly dusted with flour. His silver hair curled beneath a small baker's cap. When he noticed you, his face brightened with the kindest smile. "Welcome," he said softly. "My name is Thomas. I've been baking here for many years." His voice carried the same peaceful rhythm as everyone else in the village. Nothing hurried, nothing forced, only calm. Thomas gently placed a loaf of warm bread onto a cooling rack. You noticed something unusual. He never looked at a clock. He never rushed from one task to another. Instead, he simply watched the dough, listened to the oven, and smiled whenever the bread was ready. "The bread always tells me," he whispered. "It never likes to be hurried." You smiled. Thomas chuckled quietly. "Most people think baking is about time, but it isn't. It's about patience." He sliced a small piece from a fresh loaf. Steam rose slowly into the warm bakery. The aroma was comforting beyond words. He handed you the piece of bread. It was soft, warm, and slightly sweet. As you tasted it, you felt an unexpected feeling. Comfort, not because the bread was extraordinary, but because someone had made it slowly, carefully, with genuine kindness. Thomas nodded knowingly. "In every loaf, I place one peaceful thought. Some receive hope, some receive courage, and some simply receive a quiet evening." Outside the bakery window, snow-white moths fluttered gently around the lanterns. The moonlight reflected softly upon the glass. Thomas carefully prepared tomorrow's dough. He moved slowly, almost like a dance, adding flour, warm water, a little salt, a spoonful of honey. Then, with closed eyes, he gently whispered, "May whoever eats this bread find peaceful rest tonight." You looked toward Elias. He simply smiled. Everyone here leaves a little kindness behind for someone they may never meet. The bakery became wonderfully quiet. Only 3 sounds remained: the gentle crackle of the old oven, the soft kneading of fresh dough, and the peaceful wind outside. Time seemed to disappear completely. It no longer mattered whether minutes or hours had passed. Only the warmth of the bakery existed. Thomas placed another loaf inside the glowing oven. He carefully closed the wooden door. Then he turned toward you. Tomorrow morning, I'll show you where the village grows its moonflowers. They only bloom while the moon watches. His gentle smile carried the promise of another peaceful adventure. You thanked him quietly. As you stepped back outside, the silver moon bathed the village in its gentle light. The streets were silent. The cottages glowed warmly. Somewhere nearby, a wind chime softly sang in the breeze. And as you slowly walked home with Elias beside you, you realized something beautiful. In the forgotten moon village, even the simplest things, a loaf of bread, a quiet smile, or a peaceful walk beneath the moon, could become memories that stayed forever. The night grew deeper. The stars shimmered softly above, and the village, once again, began to drift peacefully into dreams. The garden where moonflowers bloom. Morning arrived so gently that it almost felt like part of a dream. The first light of dawn painted the rooftops with soft shades of gold, while the last silver glow of the moon slowly faded beyond the western hills. The forgotten moon village was already awake, not with noise, not with hurried footsteps, but with peaceful little sounds. Birds greeted the morning with quiet songs. The leaves whispered softly as the breeze wandered through the ancient trees. Somewhere nearby, a wooden windmill turned slowly, almost lazily, as if it too enjoyed taking its time. After a simple breakfast of warm bread, fresh butter, sweet honey, and a cup of fragrant herbal tea, you stepped outside. Waiting by the stone path was Thomas, the village baker. He wore the same flower-dusted apron as the evening before, though today he carried a small woven basket instead of fresh bread. Inside the basket were tiny silver seeds. He smiled warmly. "Today," he said softly, "I would like to show you one of the village's oldest treasures." You began walking together. The path led away from the cottages and toward the edge of the village. As you walked, the houses slowly disappeared behind flowering hedges and tall oak trees. The air became even fresher. Wildflowers grew freely beside the path. Butterflies floated gently above them. Nothing disturbed the peaceful silence except the soft crunch of gravel beneath your shoes. After a little while, Thomas stopped beside an old wooden gate. Its arch was covered with climbing roses. Tiny white blossoms swayed gently in the breeze. Above the gate, carved into smooth oak wood, were the words, "The Moonflower Garden." Thomas carefully opened the gate. Inside, everything became wonderfully quiet. The garden stretched farther than you expected. Narrow stone paths curved gently between countless flowers. White lilies, soft lavender, bluebells, jasmine, and flowers unlike any you had ever seen before. Their petals shimmered faintly, even beneath the daylight. Thomas knelt beside one small flower bed. "There," he whispered. You looked closer. Dozens of small silver buds rested quietly among deep green leaves. "They're sleeping," Thomas smiled. "They only bloom after sunset." He gently touched one of the buds with great care. Moonflowers teach us patience. They never bloom early. They never bloom late. They simply bloom when the time is right. You smiled quietly. His words seemed to carry more meaning than they first appeared. The two of you continued walking deeper into the garden. At its center stood a peaceful pond. Its water was perfectly still. White ducks floated lazily across its surface. Golden fish glided beneath the water, moving so slowly they almost seemed to be dreaming. A small wooden bench rested beneath a great willow tree. Its long branches danced softly in the morning breeze. Thomas sat down. You joined him. For several peaceful minutes, neither of you spoke. There was no need. The quiet itself felt like part of the conversation. Eventually, Thomas looked toward the sky. "Many visitors ask why this garden is so peaceful," he said. "They think it's because of the flowers." He smiled gently. "But the flowers are only part of the answer." He placed one hand upon his heart. "The real peace grows here." He looked back toward the blooming fields. "When people arrive carrying heavy thoughts, The garden never asks them to forget. It simply gives those thoughts a quiet place to rest. A soft breeze passed through the willow branches. Thousands of tiny leaves shimmered together. For a moment, the entire tree seemed to whisper, almost as though it were quietly singing an old lullaby. Time slipped by unnoticed. The morning slowly became afternoon. The sunlight grew warmer. The butterflies drifted lazily from flower to flower. Not one hurried. Not one seemed worried about tomorrow. As evening slowly returned, something wonderful began to happen. The first silver bud slowly opened. Then another. Then another. Within minutes, the entire garden glowed beneath the rising moon. Hundreds of moonflowers had awakened. Their white petals shimmered with a soft silver light. The garden no longer needed lanterns. The flowers themselves gently illuminated every winding path. Thomas smiled. They bloom for only a few peaceful hours, just enough to remind us that the most beautiful things never need to hurry. You stood quietly among the glowing flowers. The air carried their delicate fragrance. The stars slowly appeared above. The moon climbed higher into the velvet sky. Every flower seemed to lift its face toward the gentle light. And in that magical moment, the forgotten moon village felt even more timeless, even more peaceful, as though the entire world had slowed down, simply to admire the quiet beauty of one moonlit garden. Far in the distance, the old clock tower softly chimed once, a single peaceful note floating across the sylve, the ancient oak that remembered every dream. The night after the moonflowers bloomed was quieter than any night before. The silver petals slowly folded closed as the first light of dawn touched the hills. The village awakened gently once again. No loud voices, no hurried footsteps, only the comforting sounds of birds greeting the morning and the soft breeze moving through the trees. After breakfast, Elias met you outside your cottage. His moon lantern rested at his side, though it was no longer glowing beneath the morning sun. He smiled warmly. "Today," he said softly, "I'd like to introduce you to someone much older than anyone in our village." You looked around, wondering who he meant. Elias simply smiled. "You'll see." The two of you followed a narrow stone path leading away from the cottages. The road wound through quiet meadows where tiny white butterflies floated above the wildflowers. A gentle stream ran beside the path, its water so clear that smooth pebbles shimmered beneath the surface. The air smelled of fresh grass, pine needles, and warm earth after the cool night. After a peaceful walk, the path entered a forest. Sunlight filtered gently through tall trees, painting golden patterns upon the forest floor. Everything felt calm. Even the forest seemed to breathe slowly. At the heart of the woods stood an enormous oak tree. It was unlike any tree you had ever seen. Its trunk was so wide that several people holding hands could not have reached around it. Its branches stretched high into the sky like welcoming arms. Tiny lanterns hung from the lower branches. Birds built their nests among its leaves. Squirrels climbed peacefully along its bark. The entire forest seemed to gather around the ancient oak with quiet respect. Elias removed his hat. "This," he whispered, "is the old dream oak. It has stood here for longer than anyone remembers." You slowly walked closer. The bark felt warm beneath your fingertips. Gentle lines crossed its surface like the pages of an ancient storybook. Elias smiled. "The villagers believe every peaceful dream ever dreamed beneath this tree still lives quietly among its branches." A soft breeze moved through the leaves. They rustled gently, not loudly, almost like distant whispers. You closed your eyes. For a brief moment, the sound seemed almost like quiet voices telling stories, not words you could understand, just peaceful sounds, comforting, familiar, like a lullaby remembered from childhood. Elias sat upon a smooth stone beneath the tree. You joined him. Neither of you spoke. The silence itself felt meaningful. Sunlight danced gently between the leaves above. Tiny beams of light drifted slowly across the grass. Nearby, a family of rabbits quietly nibbled clover without the slightest fear. A robin landed upon one of the lower branches. It sang a gentle melody before flying softly back into the forest. Everything moved with perfect patience. After several quiet moments, Elias finally spoke. When I was a young boy, I often came here whenever my heart felt heavy. The tree never answered my questions. It simply reminded me that every season changes. He looked up into the great canopy. In spring, it grows new leaves. In autumn, it lets them go without sadness. It never tries to hold on longer than it should. You looked at the leaves gently swaying overhead. Some sparkled in the sunlight. Others danced softly in the breeze. None seemed to hurry. None seemed afraid of tomorrow. Elias smiled. Perhaps that's why people sleep so peacefully in our village. They learn from the trees. The hours passed almost unnoticed. Clouds drifted lazily across the blue sky. The forest remained wonderfully still. Eventually, the afternoon slowly melted into evening. The first silver light of the rising moon filtered gently through the branches. Something magical happened. The tiny lanterns hanging from the oak began glowing one by one, not because someone lit them, but because the moonlight seemed to awaken them. Golden lights shimmered among the leaves like hundreds of tiny stars. The ancient oak stood quietly beneath the night sky, strong, peaceful, patient, just as it had for countless generations. Elias stood slowly. It remembers every dream, he whispered, and tonight it will quietly remember yours as well. You placed one gentle hand upon the old tree once more. Its bark felt warm, steady, comforting. For just a moment, it almost seemed as though the great oak itself wished you a peaceful night. Together, you began walking back toward the village. Behind you, the ancient tree continued standing peacefully beneath the moonlight, watching over the quiet forest. The sleepy birds, the gentle breeze, and every dream that drifted silently through the forgotten moon village. The lantern keeper's secret walk. That evening, the sky seemed even more peaceful than before. The sun had quietly slipped behind the western hills, leaving the horizon painted in soft shades of rose, lavender, and deep blue. One by one, the first stars appeared. The village grew quieter with every passing moment. From your cottage window, you watched the moon slowly rise above the ancient oak forest. Its silver light spread gently across the rooftops, the gardens, and the narrow stone streets. A soft knock came at your door. When you opened it, Elias was waiting outside. His familiar lantern rested in his hand. Tonight, however, it shone brighter than usual. Inside the lantern, the silver light seemed almost alive. "Good evening," he said with a gentle smile. "Tonight is one of my favorite evenings." You stepped outside beside him. The village was wonderfully still. Warm golden lights glowed behind small cottage windows. Some families sat together by their fireplaces, reading old books. Others quietly enjoyed warm tea while listening to the gentle wind. No voices carried loudly through the streets. Everything remained calm. Elias began walking toward the village square. "This is my nightly walk," he whispered. "I followed the same path for many years." You noticed something curious. As he passed each lantern hanging beside the cottages, he gently lifted his own lantern. For just a brief moment, the lantern beside the house shimmered a little brighter. Its warm golden light became softer, warmer, almost happier. You smiled. "Do you light every lantern yourself?" Elias chuckled quietly. "No, the moon provides the light. I simply remind each lantern that night has arrived." The two of you continued through the peaceful streets. At the village fountain, the water reflected hundreds of tiny stars. It looked as though the entire sky had gently settled into the pool. Elias paused for a moment. "When I was young," he said softly, "I believed I was protecting the village." He looked around at the quiet cottages. "But after many years, I realized something. The village has always been protecting me." His words floated gently into the night air. You continued walking together. A family of hedgehogs slowly crossed the stone path. Elias patiently waited until the smallest one had reached the other side. "There is never any reason to rush," he smiled. "Even the smallest traveler deserves all the time they need." Farther ahead stood the little bakery. Its windows glowed warmly. Thomas waved quietly from inside before returning to prepare tomorrow's bread. The comforting aroma of fresh cinnamon drifted into the cool evening air. Beyond the bakery, the road climbed a gentle hill. At the top stood the oldest lantern in the village. It was larger than all the others. Its frame was made of polished bronze. Tiny stars had been carefully carved around its glass. "This lantern," Elias whispered, "has welcomed travelers for more than 200 years. He carefully opened its small door. Inside, there was no candle, no flame, only a soft silver glow. Elias raised his own lantern close. The two lights touched for just a moment. Immediately, the great lantern shone with a warm golden light that spread across the hillside. The nearby flowers seemed brighter. The trees looked softer. Even the night breeze felt warmer. "It isn't magic," Elias said with a smile. "It's kindness. When light is shared, it never becomes smaller. It simply becomes brighter for everyone." You stood together beneath the old lantern. Above you, the Milky Way stretched across the sky like a river of tiny diamonds. A shooting star quietly crossed the horizon. Neither of you made a wish. There was no need. This peaceful evening already felt like one. The village below rested quietly beneath its sea of glowing lanterns. Every path looked welcoming. Every cottage felt safe. Every light reminded someone that home was never far away. As the night grew deeper, Elias slowly closed the lantern's little door. His work was finished. He looked toward you with the same warm smile he had worn since the evening you first met. "Every night," he whispered, "I walk these streets not because the lanterns need me, but because they remind me that even the smallest light can help someone find their way." Together, the two of you slowly walked back down the hill. The moon followed silently above. The village slept peacefully below. And somewhere in the distance, the old clock tower softly rang once. A single gentle note, floating across the rooftops, across the gardens, across the quiet dreams of everyone in the forgotten moon village. By the time you reached your cottage, the night had become perfectly still. You looked back one last time. The lanterns glowed like tiny stars scattered across the earth. Elias lifted his lantern in a quiet farewell. Then, without another word, he disappeared slowly into the moonlit street. Con, the hidden lake that reflected every star. The following evening arrived quietly, just as every evening did in the forgotten moon village. The sky slowly changed from pale blue to soft shades of lavender. A cool breeze wandered gently through the gardens, carrying the sweet fragrance of jasmine and lavender. The first stars appeared one by one. They seemed to wake slowly, never all at once, as though the night itself was stretching after a peaceful sleep. After supper, Elias met you outside your cottage. His silver lantern glowed softly, lighting the narrow stone path beneath your feet. "Tonight," he whispered with a gentle smile, "I'd like to show you my favorite place in the entire village." You followed him without asking where you were going. In the forgotten moon village, there was never any need to know the destination. The journey itself was always enough. The two of you left the village behind. The cottages slowly disappeared among the trees. The path became narrower. Soft moss covered the edges of the old stones. Tiny white flowers nodded gently in the evening breeze. Fireflies floated lazily through the air. Their warm golden lights drifted between the trees like tiny floating lanterns. No sound disturbed the peaceful forest except the quiet song of a nearby stream. Even the birds had grown sleepy. Only an occasional owl greeted the night with a gentle call. After a peaceful walk, the trees slowly opened. Before you lay a beautiful lake. Its water was perfectly still. Not a single ripple disturbed its surface. For a moment, it was impossible to tell where the lake ended and where the sky began. Every star above appeared again below. Every cloud, every silver beam of moonlight was reflected so clearly that it felt as though another world existed beneath the water. You stood quietly beside the shore. Without speaking, there were no words gentle enough for a place like this. A small wooden boat rested against an old dock. Its paint had faded with time. yet it looked lovingly cared for. Elias untied the rope. Would you like to drift for a while? You stepped carefully into the little boat. It rocked gently before becoming still once more. Elias picked up a single wooden oar. He rowed so slowly that the lake barely noticed. Tiny circles spread softly across the silver water before disappearing again. The boat drifted toward the center of the lake. Around you, nothing but moonlight, nothing but stars, nothing but peaceful silence. After a long while, Elias finally spoke. When I was a child, my grandmother used to bring me here. We would count the stars together. I once asked her, "How many stars are there?" He smiled quietly. She answered, "Enough for every dream that has ever been dreamed." You looked upward. Thousands upon thousands of tiny lights shimmered across the endless sky. Then downward, the lake held exactly the same number. It felt as though you were floating gently between two heavens. A family of white swans glided peacefully across the far side of the lake. Their reflections moved beside them like quiet companions. Not far away, a fish rose gently to the surface. The smallest ripple spread outward before the water became perfectly still once again. No one hurried the moment. No one wished it away. The moon climbed a little higher. Its silver path stretched across the lake until it reached the little boat. It almost looked like a glowing road leading toward the horizon. Elias rested the oar across his knees. "There are evenings," he whispered, "when I don't row at all. I simply let the lake decide where we should drift." The boat moved almost without effort. The gentle breeze became your guide. Minutes passed, perhaps longer. Here, time no longer mattered. A shooting star quietly crossed the sky. Its reflection crossed the lake below at exactly the same moment. You smiled softly. Elias smiled too. Neither of you spoke. Some beautiful things become even more beautiful when left inside silence. The cool night air wrapped around you like a soft blanket. The gentle rocking of the boat became slow, steady, comforting. Your breathing naturally matched its rhythm. In, out, slowly, peacefully, as though the lake itself was teaching you how to rest. Eventually, the little boat drifted back toward the wooden dock. Neither of you remembered rowing. It simply felt as though the lake had quietly brought you home. As you stepped back onto the shore, you looked over your shoulder one last time. The hidden lake remained perfectly still, holding every star, every dream, every quiet hope, safe beneath its peaceful silver surface. Elias lifted his lantern. "Tomorrow," he whispered, "I'll show you the oldest bridge in the village. They say everyone who crosses it leaves a little lighter than before." Together, the two of you slowly followed the moonlit path back toward the warm lights of the forgotten moon village. Behind you, the hidden bridge of gentle goodbyes. The next evening arrived, wrapped in a quiet blanket of silver clouds. The sunset faded slowly behind the rolling hills, leaving only a soft glow along the horizon. The first evening breeze carried the familiar scents of lavender, pine, and fresh bread from Thomas's bakery. Everything felt calm. Everything felt exactly as it should. After the old clock tower gently chimed 8 slow notes, Elias appeared outside your cottage. His lantern glowed with its peaceful silver light. "Tonight," he whispered, "we're going somewhere every villager visits before the end of each season." You smiled and followed him. The two of you walked through the peaceful square. The fountain continued its quiet song. The cottages glowed warmly beneath the moon. A little girl sat beside her grandmother, carefully reading a storybook by lantern light. Neither hurried to finish the page. Beyond the village, the path led through a meadow filled with tall silver grass. The breeze moved across it like gentle waves upon the sea. Fireflies drifted above the grass, rising and falling with the rhythm of the wind. After a peaceful walk, an old stone bridge appeared. It stretched gracefully across a narrow river whose clear water reflected the moon above. The bridge was ancient. Its smooth stones had been shaped by countless gentle footsteps. Small lanterns rested along both sides, glowing softly like tiny stars. Above the center of the bridge hung a wooden sign. It read, The Bridge of Gentle Goodbyes. You looked toward Elias. He smiled kindly. This bridge is not for saying goodbye to people, he explained. It is for saying goodbye to heavy thoughts. You stepped onto the bridge. The stone beneath your feet felt cool and comforting. Halfway across, the river slowed until it became almost perfectly still. The moon rested upon its surface like polished silver. Several villagers stood quietly along the bridge. None spoke. Each simply watched the gentle water for a few peaceful moments before continuing home with lighter hearts. An elderly woman removed a tiny folded paper from her pocket. She held it close for a moment, then placed it gently into a small wooden basket beside the bridge. Elias noticed your curious expression. We never throw our worries into the river, he whispered. The river is too beautiful to carry sadness. Instead, we write them down and leave them here. He pointed toward the basket. By morning, the papers are quietly turned into tomorrow's firewood. The worries become warmth. You smiled softly. It seemed like such a simple tradition, yet somehow a very comforting one. The breeze became cooler. Above you, the stars shone brighter than ever. The sound of flowing water filled the peaceful silence. You rested your hands upon the smooth stone wall of the bridge. For a little while, you simply listened. The river never hurried. It found its own gentle path around every stone. Elias spoke once more. When people first arrive in our village, they often believe peace comes from finding the perfect place. He looked toward the quiet water below, but after a while, they discover something different. Peace grows whenever we stop carrying what no longer needs to be carried. His words drifted gently through the cool evening air. You closed your eyes. You imagined placing every remaining worry, every unfinished thought, every little burden into that small wooden basket. The feeling was surprisingly light. When you opened your eyes again, the moon seemed brighter. The breeze felt softer. Even your breathing had become slower. Together, you crossed the final few steps of the bridge. On the other side waited a quiet meadow filled with tiny white flowers glowing beneath the moonlight. For several peaceful minutes, neither of you spoke. There was no need. Sometimes, the kindest conversations happened in complete silence. Eventually, Elias smiled. I think the village has one more place it wishes to show you. He gently lifted his lantern. Far beyond the meadow, on the highest hill, a single light shone beside what looked like a very old observatory. It is where we watch the stars, he whispered, and where every story quietly finds its ending. You looked toward the distant light. It seemed warm, peaceful, almost as though it had been waiting for you all along. Together, you began walking slowly toward the hill, while behind you, the Bridge of Gentle Goodbyes rested quietly beneath the moon, helping every traveler leave behind just a little more of yesterday, so tomorrow could begin with a lighter heart. The hill where the stars whispered. The night was clear. Not a single cloud drifted across the sky. The stars stretched from one horizon to the other, shining softly above the quiet valley. The path leading toward the hill was lined with small white stones that glowed gently beneath the moonlight. They did not shine brightly, only enough to quietly guide each traveler along the way. Elias walked beside you, carrying his familiar lantern. Neither of you hurried. The climb was gentle. Each step felt lighter than the one before. The cool evening breeze carried the scent of pine forests, lavender fields, and the distant lake you had visited only a few nights earlier. When you finally reached the top of the hill, the entire forgotten moon village lay peacefully below. Every cottage window glowed with warm golden light. The tiny streets curved gently between gardens and old stone walls. The clock tower stood quietly in the center, its face glowing beneath the silver moon. From this height, the village looked less like a collection of houses and more like a handful of stars that had gently settled upon the earth. At the very top of the hill stood a small round observatory built from smooth gray stone. Its roof was open toward the sky. An elderly man waited beside a beautiful old telescope made of polished brass and dark oak. His long silver coat moved gently in the breeze. His white hair reflected the moonlight. As you approached, He smiled warmly. "Welcome," he said in a voice so calm that it blended naturally with the wind. "My name is Arthur. I have spent many years watching the stars." He slowly looked upward, but not to measure them, only to admire them. You stepped closer to the telescope. Arthur gently adjusted it. "Would you like to look?" You placed your eye against the polished glass. The stars appeared larger, brighter, more peaceful than ever before. Some shimmered softly. Others glowed with a quiet golden light. Far away, a silver comet slowly crossed the darkness. Its graceful path seemed almost endless. Arthur smiled. Many people think the stars are very far away. He paused for a moment. But peaceful thoughts have a way of reaching them. The three of you stood together in comfortable silence. The breeze whispered through the grass. An owl called gently from the forest below. Somewhere in the village, the old bell rang a single soft note. Arthur quietly poured 3 cups of warm herbal tea from a small silver kettle. The gentle steam curled upward into the cool night air. He handed 1 cup to you. Its warmth felt comforting in your hands. "You know," Arthur said softly, "every evening I watch the first star appear, and every evening it reminds me that even after the darkest sunset, light always returns." You looked toward the horizon. The moon now stood high above the village. Its silver light touched every rooftop, every garden, every winding path, every quiet dream. Arthur pointed toward the sky. "There is an old story here. They say every peaceful dream becomes a tiny star, and every kind heart helps those stars shine a little brighter." Whether the story was true, no one really knew. But standing beneath that endless sky, it felt possible, very possible. Time slipped quietly onward. No one counted the minutes. There was nothing waiting, nothing to finish. Only this beautiful moment beneath the stars. Eventually, Arthur closed the telescope. "It is getting late," he whispered kindly. "The village will soon fall into its deepest sleep." He smiled at you. "But tomorrow morning, before you continue your journey, there is one final place you must visit." Elias nodded gently. "The heart tree." Arthur's eyes sparkled. "It has stood in the center of the village longer than any house. It has watched every sunrise, every snowfall, and every traveler who has ever found this peaceful place." The three of you stood together for one last quiet moment, looking down upon the forgotten moon village. Its lanterns glowed softly. The lake reflected the stars. The old oak rested peacefully in the forest. The bakery windows still carried a warm golden light. Everything felt exactly as it should. As you began walking slowly back down the hill, you realized something wonderful. When you had first arrived, you had been searching for a hidden village, but somewhere along the journey, without even noticing, the village had quietly found a home inside you. The moon smiled gently above. The stars continued their silent watch, and the peaceful night wrapped itself around the forgotten moon village, preparing for one final sunrise, the heart tree, and the journey home. The final morning in the forgotten moon village arrived quietly, just as every morning had since you first walked along the old moonlit road. Golden sunlight filtered gently through your cottage window. Outside, the birds welcomed the new day with soft melodies. The cool breeze carried the familiar scent of lavender, fresh bread, and the pine forest beyond the village. For a few peaceful moments, you simply sat beside the window, watching the village slowly awaken. You realized something surprising. You no longer felt like a visitor. Somehow, without noticing, the forgotten moon village had begun to feel like home. A gentle knock sounded at your door. When you opened it, Elias stood there with his silver lantern. Although the morning sun had already risen, the lantern still held a faint silver glow. He smiled kindly. "Good morning. Today, there is one final place I'd like to show you." You walked together through the quiet village. Thomas stood outside the bakery. He handed you one warm loaf of bread wrapped in soft linen. "A gift for your journey," he said with a gentle smile. Nearby, the old woman from the flower garden gave you a small bundle of dried lavender, so every evening may carry a little piece. Children waved happily as you passed. The white cat stretched beneath its favorite wooden bench, before lazily closing its eyes again. Nothing felt rushed. Nothing felt like a farewell. It simply felt like another beautiful morning. Soon, you arrived at the center of the village. There, standing proudly beneath the blue sky, was the heart tree. It was smaller than the great dream oak in the forest, yet somehow it felt even older. Its leaves shimmered with gentle shades of green and silver. Tiny white blossoms covered its branches. Birds rested quietly among its leaves. A circular stone bench surrounded its trunk. Villagers often came here, not to speak, simply to sit quietly. Elias rested one hand upon the tree. For generations, this tree has reminded us of something important. He looked toward you. Peace is never something we find. It is something we remember. You slowly sat upon the stone bench. The breeze moved gently through the branches. Thousands of tiny leaves whispered together. The sound reminded you of the lake, the Moonflower Garden, the bakery, the lantern walk, the ancient oak, every peaceful place you had visited. It was as though the entire village had gathered together inside this single moment. Elias smiled. When travelers leave, they often ask how they can return. He gently touched the heart tree. And I always give them the same answer. You don't need to search for the village. When life becomes noisy, when your days become busy, when your heart grows tired, simply slow down. Take one quiet breath. Look at the moon. And remember, the road will always find you. Those words settled softly within your heart. The old clock tower rang once. Its gentle chime drifted across the village. Thomas stepped outside his bakery. The villagers smiled as they quietly continued their morning. No one gathered to say goodbye, because here, goodbyes were never sad. They simply trusted that peaceful memories always found their way home. You and Elias slowly walked toward the wooden gate where your journey had begun. The old sign still stood beside the road. Its weathered letters remained clear. Welcome home. You smiled. This time, you understood why those words had never changed. The village had never expected you to stay forever. It simply wanted you to remember that peace could always become your home. Elias lifted his silver lantern one final time. Its gentle light shimmered beneath the morning sky. It has been a joy walking beside you, he whispered. But every peaceful journey continues in its own quiet way. You thanked him. He simply nodded. Then, with one warm smile, he turned and slowly walked back toward the village. The cottages glowed softly beneath the morning sun. The bakery filled the air with the scent of fresh bread. The fountain continued its gentle song. The heart tree danced softly in the breeze. The forgotten moon village slowly disappeared behind the hills, not because it had vanished, but because it belonged to those who carried it within their hearts. You continued along the old stone road. Each step felt lighter. The world ahead no longer seemed rushed. The wind felt gentler. The birds sang a little sweeter. The sunlight appeared a little warmer. And somewhere, far behind you, perhaps only in memory, or perhaps in another quiet corner of the world, the old clock tower rang once more. The silver lanterns glowed softly. The moonflowers opened beneath the evening sky. Thomas baked another warm loaf of bread. The dream oak listened to another peaceful dream. The hidden lake reflected another 1,000 stars. And the forgotten moon village